Hello. So, the title of today's podcast from me, I am now the Assistant Director of the Institute of Socioproctology. I used to be the director, but sadly, as I have explained in a statement which I issued recently, as a consequence of Me Too, I have admitted. Firstly, I should explain that the charges which are brought against me, I um, have not actually acknowledged that they are true. I am not saying that my accuser was correct. I am not admitting to certain very, very reprehensible types of actions. They are not just repugnant to me as a moral person, as a devout Hindu, they are repugnant to me. But at the very same time, I want to express my deep sympathy, my deep empathy for people who have suffered genuine distress, or even if it was not genuine, they made it up. I have to accept that we live in a society where there has been a rampant violation of human rights on the basis of gender and race and class and people in positions of authority. They have abused their power. And this has created a climate of fear, a fear psychosis. So I have stepped down as director of the Institute of Socioproctology. And there is an irony, I think, that the person who is currently has become the director is the very same person who made allegations of sexual abuse against me. The irony is, of course, that it was sexual self-abuse. As anybody who has followed my literary career going back 20, 25 years, they will know that before I came into socioproctology, I was the chairman and president of the Worldwide Anti-Masturbation Society. You know, we were financed. In fact, we organized all over the world. We organized events. We tried to crowdsource resources in the fight for anti-masturbation. And sadly, women failed to come forward in sufficient numbers. I mean, some prostitutes did come, but they were charging too much. So it was really failure on the part. I'm not saying it's only women. There are homosexuals who are masturbating and thinking of hunky guys. Let's admit it. This is 2021, or it's going to be 2022. These things happen. But if men and hunky men, and women are not coming to offer their orifices, how can the cause of anti-masturbation triumph? Now, many people say, and they have told me, they have said, Vivek, you see, what you need to do is you need to put some lengthy things on your, like lead weights, on your ding-dong, stretch it out, make it bendy, और फिर तू कूद अपनी गांड मार, sodomize yourself. So that's not masturbation because you're. I mean, I appreciate that there is a lot of. I would not say. I mean, this is a very scientific type of argument, and I did try to sell some products on the internet which should have enabled something of the sort. I think we've all. venture capitalists, we've all done that type of, we've entertained the notion of doing that type of venture capitalism. But this is not really the essence of the gravamen that I am, or the charge that I am bringing against democracy. It is democracy. There is a deficit in democracy. Democracy has been hijacked. It has been hijacked by things like Me Too, by shrill identitarian movements, special interests, special pleading, you know. Now, as of course, the director of my institute may say that, that some vicious self-abuse occurred, but that is because of boredom. The fact is that I've been publishing very, very long books on Amartya Sen and on Gayatri Spivak and so forth, just in the course of this year. And the point is that if you listen to Amartya Sen or Gayatri Spivak, and you can on the YouTube and so forth, the mind, it experiences an almost catatonic shutdown of higher brain functions because of extreme boredom and the stupidity. And the one way that people can fend off brain death is through having very vivid, erotic fantasies. And, that can also lead to, well, it can lead to self-abuse. I'm not saying it did lead to self-abuse. And, but I think this is really an issue where the director of the Institute of Socioproctology, it is he who should really provide an explanation as to how self-abuse could lead to my being downgraded to being the assistant director, while he, who is me, remains as the director. And the reason I'm kind of dwelling upon this is because I want to show that as an Institute of Socioproctology is absolutely above board. It is not a one-man operation. We have a director, we have an assistant director, we have an intern who's also me, and we have various other people who are me. But, it's not a one-man band per se. But I think we're getting away from the topic of this podcast, which is Biden's democracy and Dr. Death. Dr. Death was this. This is about an American doctor called Christopher Dunch, Dunch, and you see, he could have been a good doctor but he wanted to be a surgeon, and so being a surgeon involves chopping people up. And unfortunately, he had a PhD, so he was not just an MD; he was also a PhD. And the fact is that PhD, it's a qualification which makes people stupider than they need to be, because they have to do research, and research tends to be shit. So they're stupider than they need to be, and they've been basically fabricating results. So the high PhD, it's a shit. It means you're shit. I know there are some PhDs who are not shit, but the PhD didn't help them become non-shit. It was just a hurdle that they had to jump across. It was a hurdle for them. It's just part of. It's just a screening, or it's supposed to screen, but it doesn't. It's adversely selective. And in the case of this Dr. Death, what was happening was that the fact that he was doing this PhD it's what contributed to his being a shit doctor, because basically the PhD was a fraud. It was based on grabbing some Russian guy's research and talking it up so as to get venture capital flooding in. And that's fine. I mean, venture capital can do that, but you don't need PhDs. You can disintermediate the PhD because the standard is so low. The market can do better. And, in the Amazon or whatever it was, I think Amazon or Netflix or whatever, the series Dr. Death, you had, uh, the Russian couple, they're incredulous. They're saying, do you know basic science? You don't know basic science. And that was true. But you can say that about every single bloody American PhD that any Indian that I know of, who's well known, who's who's prominent, who's a celebrity, or however modestly on, but every publicity hungry Indian PhD that I know of, whether their PhD was in Sanskrit or in English or in economics or in anything, whatever you name it, they shit. Because you see, research is adversely selective because you're concentrating on worthless shit, which the market hasn't yet certified. So it's a discovery process, but the market process is better. So you're marking to market, unless you get lucky. I mean, you're doing something parallel to what marking to market means. It's a process of evaluation, but it's the shitty one. It's adversely selective. Marking to market, at least the market, there will be a shakeout. But with credentials, there is no shakeout. Um, and with the Dr. Death case, you can see exactly why this guy got away with butchering people, including his best friend. He butchered him. Why? And the answer is because the functioning of the market in Texas had been disabled by a cap on damages. So, so it's a market failure because there had been no cap on damages. Then the clinics and so forth, insurers and so forth, they'd have weeded this guy out. They'd have taken a look, they'd have said 2 in a row, 3 in a row, that's it, fuck off. Privilege is revoked. And the other thing is, as a matter of abundant caution, you go after the guy, you go after his professor, you go after everybody else. As a matter of abundant caution. Because otherwise, what is your tort liability? It's basically unlimited. you know. So the great minimizing strategy under proper working markets without arbitrary limitation on torts, in other words, on the remedy for for a market failure. This is what you get. So my point is that the credential was shit. That the doctorate, PhD, basically it reduces work skills and it increases systemic risk because the chap has spent 3 years, 4 years looking at shit and saying the shit is really tasty chocolate cake. And then he's part of a Ponzi scheme. And market does things better. This type of screening device is adversely selective. And now, how does all this relate to democracy and the abject failure of Biden's democracy summit and the fact that I think 2021 is the year when people suddenly said democracy is not as good as any regime of any sort which does sensible things and which changes course, does course correction in a timely manner, and which keeps the people happy, seems responsive. It doesn't matter what type of regime it is. It could be a monarchy, it could be a plutocracy, it could be, it doesn't matter. And where there is any significant threat to public order, it must be authoritarian. If it isn't authoritarian, then you have anarchy. So that's it. It's a bit of an advance on Alexander Pope saying, for forms of government, let fools contest. Whatever is best administered is best. Change that a little. The regime which makes good enough choices, is popular enough, is It's a question of regret minimization. It's a regime which is based on what already existed. It's a continuation of it, and it's good enough. That's it. That's the whole story. And the Obama type of stupidity, I think Michelle Obama said, run towards the noise. Don't. Don't run towards the noise. Don't run towards the smell. Don't run towards the noise. Don't be stupid. Don't run. Do some jogging. Get an exercise bike. But, uh, just stop signaling and talking bullshit. Because, the thing ends. The thing ends badly. The price of freedom is that you constantly check that you have hedges, that you have effective hedges, and that any remedies you have under the law, that they continue to be incentive compatible. In other words, that there's a incentive for the obligations holder to provide the remedy. But to a large extent, this also involves quitting one jurisdiction or reducing your exposure to one jurisdiction, hedging your bets, disintermediating mechanisms which are no longer incentive compatible. It's that sort of it is. So but it's not a paranoid type of vigilance. It is merely like portfolio choice, or it's discretionary. It's nothing to do with collective action, except insofar as of a negative type, really, of organizing to prevent virtue signalers and moral panics, instituting incentive incompatible legislation, or creating bonds of law which are incentive compatible. Curtailing the bullshit. And I think that's really where socioproctology comes in. It's basically about saying this guy the shithead is an asshole because all the shit inside his head it's coming out of his asshole. He's a fucking asshole, and but of course you just need to point your finger at the asshole and say this is an asshole. Fuck off, asshole. Stop shitting on everything. So it is a defensive sort of epistemic device, socioproctology. And I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm not saying that socioproctologists have never made unfair allegations of sexual abuse against themselves. I'm not saying that doesn't happen. In fact, socioproctologists are assholes. But we don't try to shit higher than our asshole. See, that's the difference between us, or me, and also me. At least I haven't killed anybody. Whereas proponents of democracy and people who talk about the need to stand up against the rising tide of authoritarian populism and so forth, they have blood on their hands because they arouse certain expectations and fail to fulfill them. Whereas, even if the allegation against me is true, and certain things got aroused, the essence of the gravamen, the complaint against me, the essence of it is that I was able to satisfy those expectations, one way or the other. Yes. Your fate is in your hands. And, yeah. But of course, it's all lies, All lies. You should believe me. Well, if you don't, or, people should really, until young women get involved in the fight against masturbation, how can ugly elderly men like myself, how can we prevail? Think about it.